The January 6 bombshells, that is, like the evidence on tape we just played of really disgruntled and distressed, probably, Republican members, angry and very aware of ex-President Donald Trump's culpability in inciting the insurrection. Apparently, it's just the beginning of the beginning. Congressman and January 6 Select Committee member Jamie Raskin promised at an event last night the explosive revelations they're about to drop in upcoming public hearings will, quote, tell a story that will really blow the roof off the House, end quote. And on Trump specifically, Congressman Raskin says this, quote, no president has ever come close to doing what happened here in terms of trying to organize an inside coup to overthrow an election and bypass the constitutional order. As we know now, it was so obvious at the time to Republican leadership that they were desperate for a way out of Trump's presidency and their ties to him. Joining our conversation is Democratic Congresswoman Elaine Luria of Virginia. She's a member of the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th insurrection. Thank you for your time today. I have to ask you if you'd heard these tapes before.
Well, I hadn't heard the tapes themselves, but I would say that, although it may appear surprising on the surface, it's kind of been par for the course for a lot of our Republican colleagues to say one thing in private and not have the courage to speak up in the same way in public.
It's an important point because you're immersed in the evidence. I think if you have any role in, and we cover the Republicans with great skepticism, but they have painted such an alternate reality. To hear Kevin McCarthy on tape say this, this is one personal fear I have, he says on the newly released tapes. I do not want to get into any conversation about Pence pardoning. Again, the only discussion I would have with him is that I think this will pass, meaning either the 25th Amendment resolution or the impeachment resolution. It's not completely clear. And it would be my recommendation you, Donald Trump, should resign. That would be my take, but I don't think he would take it. Do you view the acknowledgement that an assumption is made by the Republican leader that Pence would have to pardon him after he resigns, as McCarthy thinks he should, of McCarthy's knowledge of criminal conduct?
Well, certainly, Nicole, I think anytime someone's talking about pardoning, there is actually implied criminal conduct there that's being addressed. So, again, as you said, can't read directly into the words of what he meant by this will pass. My impression was kind of, if he resigns and he's, out of the White House, then, the tension on it may pass was probably how I interpreted that. But it is certainly implied if you're talking about pardoning that you are implying that criminal conduct is in question. As you mentioned earlier in the broadcast, there were the indications, that former President Trump said to McCarthy at one point that he felt some responsibility relative to the events that happened on January 6th. So tying all of these pieces together in real time, I would understand why McCarthy would, in the back of his mind, have the idea that, there could have been criminal activity and Trump could very well be interested in seeking a pardon on the other side of this.
There's been several days of sort of reaction and blowback from reporting that the committee had amassed enough evidence to make a criminal referral to DOJ should they wish to. This acknowledgement from Kevin McCarthy that Donald Trump was looking at potential pardon from Mike Pence, who would ostensibly become the president if he resigned, seems to make that debate silly. I mean, it seems that turning over your evidence to DOJ in the form of a criminal referral is something that even Kevin McCarthy on Truth Serum would agree with as necessary.
That's a good way to look at it. And, I've said earlier that, I think it's our responsibility. If we have evidence that indicates there's criminal activity, I think it's incumbent on us as Congress to pass that along in order for that to be evaluated for criminal activity and handled accordingly.
So many mysteries are solved, I think, for the general public to hear this tape. Liz Cheney was on Fox News Sunday before Chris Wallace ever left as anchor of that program, talking about the need for Kevin McCarthy to testify before a commission, before the Republicans had even killed the commission. What is the importance of having him testify through whatever means, even if you have to subpoena him?
Well, he has information that we need. He has direct information. He had conversations directly with the president. He knows what his thought process was, and what transpired during these conversations with other Republicans in the House. And, we need to hear and understand from him, because the truth is, all the way up until about January 13th, he was saying the right thing. He was condemning the violence. He was calling it out for what it was, but then something changed. So what was it that changed, and why did it change? That made him start singing a different tune, and essentially, rather than doing the right thing, holding the former president accountable for his actions, he decided that he had to go along with it and continue to show allegiance to the former president and really bring the rest of his caucus, other than a few very brave people like Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and others, but a small group, went along with him and have continued to show that allegiance to Trump, rather than their duty to their constituents, to the Constitution, and really upholding our democracy.
I mean, you are one of the clearest members of Congress and of the committee on these questions of criminality being clearly beyond a preponderance of evidence, and also on the importance of talking to Kevin McCarthy. Are these debates inside the committee this blunt and this clear? I mean, it sounds like you would be supportive of a subpoena for Kevin McCarthy if he doesn't testify voluntarily. Do I have that right?
We are, as a committee, discussing a lot of aspects of the investigation. I'm not going to, share our internal conversations. We've extended a letter to Leader McCarthy back in January, saying and spelling out why we understand he has information that's important to the committee's investigation. And, now more than ever, we would like to hear from him and like him to share the truth about what he knows, what was said on those calls, and what happened during conversations with the former president.
And it feels like you also have some questions, not clear if you have theories on what the answers are, but some questions about what you just described as what changed. That through the 13th, up was up, down was down. Donald Trump incited a deadly insurrection, and in Kevin McCarthy's words, had to go. He was talking about a pardon from Mike Pence, who only issues a pardon if he becomes the president. And then, in your words, something changes. Is that part of the investigation? What might have changed between the 13th and when Kevin McCarthy's public tune changes dramatically on that trip to Mar-a-Lago?
It certainly is. It's definitely of a lot of interest to me, because, I heard Kevin McCarthy, I heard other leaders in the House and the Senate essentially doing and saying the right thing, calling out the violence. And then all of a sudden that tune changed, and they were back essentially to falling in behind President Trump and this big lie, and continuing to perpetuate this idea that there had been election fraud. And so, what we really need in this country is we really need two serious political parties that can, debate on the merits of policy, not one party that has this complete allegiance to an individual, and, fails to recognize that they are part of upholding the laws of the country.
What is the sort of part of the story that may be missing that Donald Trump Jr. could help fill in if